here at Devoxx Belgium, and I'm talking to Juergen Hoeller, and we're going to talk about Spring. So we have a lot to talk about. Uh,
Indeed.
we'll keep it to a few things, though, maybe. So Java, this morning in the keynote, Mark Reinhold talked about the change to the cadence of the releases. So we're now going every 6 months, we're going with a minor release of Java, or not necessarily minor, but not long-term support.
It major.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I have to be careful.
Yeah.
Sorry. A release.
Yeah.
A release. So how does that impact Spring? How does that impact your project?
It is. It will impact everybody, right? In one form or the other. In particular, the open source ecosystem. We've already been trying actually with the JDK 10 early access build from last week, so we already know a little bit about the impact. It is a very ambitious effort and kudos to the OpenJDK team for kind of stepping up to the times and having a more agile release model. But personally, my impression is that it's a little too radical at this point. I would have appreciated a 1-year cadence over a half-year cadence, but it is what it is, right? And I'm very openly embracing any outcome of what they end up with next year. So we are planning already with the assumption that JDK 10 comes out in March and JDK 11 in September. There's going to be a new bytecode version in every one of those releases, so we'll have to be prepared in terms of all the bytecode generation libraries in the stack. They have to be able to handle being deployed to JDK 10. This is non-trivial, right? There's a lot of traditional assumptions in the Java ecosystem, like ASM rejecting unknown bytecode versions. We have to get more lenient there. Like the tools and frameworks and libraries that we're providing have to assume that there might be a new JDK coming up underneath them without the revision at the framework or library level. So just an open-ended, lenient assumption of try to do your job, even if you're running on an unknown new JDK. I guess we can get there, but it will need a little bit of a bubble through the ecosystem where this approach towards running on new JDK versions aligns with the OpenJDK plans with the half-year iterations. But in any case, to me it is a very, from my perspective and from a Spring application developer's perspective, this has to be seen as a very good thing. We're going to get new language features. Well, we're not getting more new language features. We're getting language features in between, right? We don't have to wait an entire full 3-4 year period. We can get them, if we are interested in them, more eagerly in between. That's the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, of course, we know it's all about production, right? And we know that in production, decision making in production just has to take into account the support timelines. I have the fear that the decision making out there in the industry is going to be between long-term support releases only. So this model of in between you have to update your JDK and to a new bytecode version, everything that follows every half year. It's not feasible for a production scenario. So my assumption is that it's JDK 8. JDK 8 is basically the new JDK 6 now, the one baseline that everybody works with for a long, long time. Even in 5 years, we're going to have plenty of JDK 8 deployment environments out there, I'm sure. And the next chance is JDK 11, right, in September next year, being a long-term support release again. Hopefully, at least, that is being adopted more eagerly. I hope so, but it's not in our hands. From a Spring perspective, we take these decisions as they are being made, right? If the industry at large decides to stay at JDK 8 level in production, then so be it. We're going to support everybody where they are, right? We're not trying to force them anywhere. It's a balanced strategy, right? And the same, of course, applies to other infrastructure out there. So with Java EE, it's less clear where it's going, but it's just clear that we are seeing the end of Java EE as we know it. So Java EE 8 probably was the last traditional Java EE platform revision, and the continuation of those specification efforts is now to be found in EE4JA at Eclipse. my assumption is that it's going to be a more individual affair now. The servlet spec, the JPA spec, bean validation checks, RS, they're going to see more of a life of their own than before. That can be a very good thing. I mean, previously some of those specifications were not allowed to release, to go final before the platform went final, right? So now, hopefully, once the Servlet 4.1 group decides that it's worth releasing Servlet 4.1, hopefully they just can, right? In a reasonable time frame, not waiting on anybody else. I see that as a very positive thing. I hope it materializes. It has yet to happen. It's still in the very early stages. The decision-making processes are unclear. Let's see where this is going. But our Tomcat group is very actively engaged in the servlet spec, of course, and so there's definitely some goodness coming out of this, but it has yet to be seen how it will work in practice without this overall governance that Oracle used to provide. It means that there has to be more individual contribution, more a multi-stakeholder thinking in there that traditionally wasn't there, right? Oracle did a reasonably good job in guidance as well, right? There's now a lack of guidance, so it means that every stakeholder kind of needs to make up their own perspective in terms of what they actually want out of the further evolution of E4J, and then aligning their own perspective with the interests of others, right? That is not an easy exercise. Interesting social dynamics waiting to be uncovered there, I'm sure, right? And just stakeholder interests between the likes of Red Hat and IBM, of course, and so let's see where all of this is going. But our strategy in Springland is basically the same as always. We just take the industry as it is, in particular the production landscape. Currently everybody's on an EE7 baseline. There's basically, other than Tomcat 9, no EE8 production server really out there yet, and we'll just observe where it's going. So currently EE7 baseline, EE8 supports if we encounter it at runtime. That will be with us for several years, I'm sure. And any further updates in the relevant specifications are to be adopted when they're out. We are always there very early, but in practice, the only thing that matters is when people actually use it in production. That's usually years after us supporting them. So let's see, right? It always goes in a circle. I personally believe that the critical part here is the availability of products, right? How can you expect anybody to upgrade to a new JDK or a new application server generation if they don't get proper support for it? First of all, there needs to be a proper product release and a support timeline attached to it. Then and only then, decision makers can start planning for the upgrade. That applies to application servers just as much as to the JDK.
There's a lot to take in there.
Yeah, yeah, but interesting times.
A big task. A big task on your part.
It certainly is, but not just on our part, right? So that's a key message in its own right. This is really an ecosystem effort. Those things can only work out, like JDK baseline upgrades, application server or server container upgrades, whatever. They can only work out if the ecosystem as a whole kind of moves in that direction. So it's not just, we're trying to do our part, and we're trying to help others, right? Or push others a little. But we can only go so far. In the end, we're very pragmatic about this, and actually pretty happy with the baseline that we have. There's a lot of innovation to be seen on JDK8, right? It's not like we absolutely require upgrades at that level. The reactive story, functional API design, there's so much innovation to be uncovered still, perfectly working on a JDK8 baseline, right? So let's not feel constrained by the unavailability of newer generations in production. We certainly don't wait on anything in particular, and just do our thing for the time being, and adopt new infrastructure generations as they materialize.
And now, looking at Spring Boot, so you have a major release of Spring Boot coming up in December.
Oh yes.
How's that going?
heavy lifting there still. It's Spring Boot 2.0 is scheduled to go GA in December still, probably as a Christmas present, like literally. We have our Spring 1 conference in the first week of December, so it's going to be in the release candidate stages then, and hopefully GA before Christmas still. Spring Boot 2.0 is our single most important deliverable this year. And I'm saying that as the Spring Framework project lead, right? Spring Framework 5.0 GA, of course, was a very important step in its own right. But we understand that a lot of our ecosystem, a lot of our user base has Spring Boot as its starting point, right? So the availability and of all of this in Spring Boot 2.0, Spring Framework 5, Spring Security 5, Spring Integration 5, all coming together in Spring Boot 2.0 is an essential step to take. But of course, take a deep breath. We need to take a deep breath, right, and just go there. I'm really looking forward for Spring Boot 2.0 to be fully available. And in the meantime, I recommend trying the latest milestone or the upcoming release candidate 1. They do a perfectly fine job for everybody in development, but I'm really looking forward to its production availability.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.